Hello and welcome to lesson 6.1 in the Alice tutorial series. Today we're going to be looking at two concepts, sequential actions and simultaneous actions, that we'll use in our programs to create some more sophisticated animations. What we'll be doing today is making a crude walking animation, and when you're programming, there's actions that can be done in a single step, such as moving forward or turning to face something. And then there's also something called composite actions, and that's actions that require multiple lines of code to be performed. For example, if you had someone walking. When somebody's walking, their front leg is moving forward, their back leg is moving backwards, and they're moving forward at the same time. So you got three things going on. You've got individual legs moving in different directions, as well as a general direction of the entire object moving. So we'll make a crude walking animation and really briefly look at how do we use a simultaneous action block, which is called a DoTogether statement in Alice, to make our animations a little bit more sophisticated. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this example, we're going to add an object, and you can see I'm already in the people gallery, but if you're not in the people gallery, just scroll on over to people, and we're going to drag this coach into our world, because this is the guy that we're going to want to perform our actions. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to drop his arms down to his side, because he looks a little bit funny standing that way. And so let's just turn him to face the camera, affect subparts, and turn that first arm down to his side. Oops, a little bit far. That should be about right. Turn him to face the other way. Grab the turn forwards and backwards tool and affect subparts. Drag that arm down and make sure it's in about the right spot. There we go. And turn him back to face the camera. Okay, that's a little bit better. So now we have our coach. Now up to this point, we've done some real basic movements. So if I go back to my programming window and select the coach, say I tell the coach to move to his right 5 meters. That might be a little bit much. Let's go 3 meters and hit play. There we go. So he's moved 3 meters to the right. And then I want him to move backwards. And let's move him backwards another 3 meters. When I hit play now, he'll move to the right and then move backwards. This is what's known as sequential action. That is, things happening in order, one after another. Down here, you've got some tools that you can use. DoInOrder, DoTogether, if, else, loop, while. So we'll get to all these things, but today we're going to focus on DoInOrder and DoTogether. If I want the coach to move backwards and right at the same time, I can put these in a DoTogether statement. The DoTogether statement creates this purplish block, and then every line of code that falls under the DoTogether statement until it hits the end of this purplish line will be executed together. When I hit play, the coach moves back and to the right at the same time. Because I don't necessarily have a move diagonal selection, this is how I can get objects to move other than just in the 6 directions: forward, back, left, right, up, and down. He's now performing those actions together. If I were to use a DoTogether statement, or a DoInOrder statement, and drag these two guys down there, we can see the DoTogether will do nothing, but now the coach is going to move backwards and to the left because that's the order I have this code in. Now by default, all of your lines of code will be in a DoInOrder statement. So if I just dragged these guys here and had them not in a DoInOrder or in a DoTogether, I've just got them in nothing, by default it's going to run these in a DoInOrder fashion. So I hit play, and the coach moves. He does one line of code and then the other line of code. However, if I put these back in the DoTogether, he'll take these actions at the same time. We can use this to our advantage to make some pretty neat animations. So our goal now is to make this coach walk forward. So let's erase this example code here. I want to create a scene in which this coach is going to walk across the screen. This is going to be a pretty crude animation. This is not going to be a super sophisticated walking animation, but it will definitely get the job done. So we're going to have the coach start by facing to the left as we see it on the screen. When a person walks forward, the first thing I want to do is affect the coach's leg. So let's go ahead and select the coach, and let's limit this movement to his right leg. So I'm going to take the coach's right leg, and I want it to turn forward. And you can play with these numbers. I find 0.1 is pretty good. You can see if we use 0.2 and hit play, his leg moves a little bit too far back for kind of a realistic walking animation. So you'll play with this and do some trial and error, but I find 0.1 revolution is the way to go. And so that leg is rotating backwards. I know it says forwards here, but it has to do with the axes, so it'll be reversed for the feet. That's no big deal. So let's grab the left leg and tell it to turn backwards by the same amount, 0.1 revolutions. When we hit play, the legs will move in order because by default we're using a do in order statement. I want both of these things to happen at the same time, so I'm going to drag a do together block along with my 2 lines of code, and now the coach's legs should move at the same time. So the legs moved at the same time. This is pretty good. Let's restart it and see that again. Well, that's great, but we need the coach to be moving forward as well. I'm going to tell the coach, while your legs are moving, I want the entire coach to move forward, and I find 0.2 meters is good for this line of code right here, and hit play. Now the coach is moving forward while his legs are moving. We're in a pretty good spot here. Now that that's over, I want him to continue moving forward, but I need his feet to switch the way that they're going. That is, the leg that went backward now needs to swing forward, and the leg that went forward needs to swing backwards. Now, for those of you familiar with programming concepts and familiar with Alice, we could use a loop here. I'm going to purposely ignore the loop because it's not going to really come up until a future lesson, and I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So what we need now is another do together statement with these 2 blocks of code changed. The right leg that moved forward needs to go backwards now, and the leg that went backwards needs to go forward. Now I can't simply just drag these over because it will move my lines of code, but one quick way to do this, if you don't want to redesign all of the code that you've dragged, right click and select make a copy. I now have 2 identical statements, and I can take this one and drag it to the other do together block. I'll repeat this process for the left leg, make a copy, drag it, and make a copy of the move command and drag that. Now all I have to do is reverse the direction the legs are going. I'm going to change this forward to backwards, and this backwards to forwards. Let's take a look at how this animation looks. Well, that worked good for a single step forward, but I want him to walk forward a little bit more than this. To accomplish this, I'm going to double these numbers. If the right leg started from a standing position and moved forward 0.1 revolutions, then to reset it and move it in the opposite direction by 0.1 revolutions, I'd really need to move this by 0.2. I have to account for the 0.1 it moved forward and the additional 0.1 that I want to move it backwards. The left leg is going to do the same thing. So I'm going to change that to 0.2 revolutions. And I'm going to move the animation forward 0.4 revolutions since his feet are essentially moving twice as much. So let's hit play and see how this works. So far, so good. Now, I could be looping this again, but what I want to do is now repeat this line of code here because the legs are going to go in the opposite direction now. So I'm going to copy this entire do together block. So make a copy. And now I've got 2 identical do together blocks. I want this block that I just copied to Come all the way down to the bottom. Now make sure this green line isn't in your DoTogether loop. It needs to be outside on the bottom. I now have 3 independent DoTogether statements, and these will all execute in order, 1, 2, and 3. But for this one right here, I'm going to double this as well because I'm not ready for my animation to stop. So I'm going to change these to 0.2 revolutions each, and the distance forward to 0.4. Let's hit play. So we've got the coach moving forward. And now I can just copy this a little bit. I can say, okay, we're going to make a copy and drag that to the bottom. I'm going to make a copy and drag that to the bottom. And we should have a working walking animation. All we have to do now is reset the coach to a standing position. Now, just as a side note, as we do this, we can start to see the code can get a little bit confusing. It's trying to remember exactly what's going on. When I hit play, the animation is working correctly, so that's good. But these blocks of code can start to get a little confusing. This little guy here on the bottom right is known as a comment block. If I were to drag this up, this is a line of code that doesn't impact the program at all. But what I can say is this is a let's see, we'll call this an other, and this string will be start of the walking animation. By adding a comment, I now know exactly what this block of code is doing. That can help me keep it separate from the other blocks of code. If I were to take this line right here, I can say this is the first part of a full step. And if I scroll down here, I can say that this is the second part of a full step. What this will do is when I'm copying and pasting all of these blocks of code, if I have comments in them, it'll become much easier to determine which one's which. So let's go ahead and add comments to the rest of these parts as well. So this will be the first part again. So let's change this to first part of a full step. Oops. Oh, this is second step. I kind of changed the format a little bit, but that's fine. Let's go up here and say that this is the second part of a walking animation. And so what I want to do is pretty much have our guy come to a stop. So let's copy the start of the walking animation. And now I can see I have 2 of them, which makes it easier to determine when I can't get them all on the screen. And let's drag this all the way to the bottom. And I think this will give us an error in our walking animation. I think when we get to this part right here, this will push the legs in the wrong direction, but that's fine. We can mess with that in a second and make it work. So let's hit play and see what happens. Our steps are going okay. And we can see his legs move in the wrong direction for that last step. Now I can do one of 2 things. I can either change this to backwards and forward, I can transpose those, or I can simply throw another part of the walking animation, the first part, onto the bottom. So let's make a copy of this first part of the walking animation. Make sure that I'm grabbing a first part, so there's where the 2 are right next to each other. And so let's drag this between the second part and our start block. Make sure the green bar is between the 2 blocks, and let's run the animation now. So there we go. The coach is walking in a somewhat realistic fashion. The reason he's walking in this realistic fashion is because we have DoTogether blocks. We're moving the right leg, the left leg, and the coach forward at the exact same time, and then reversing the animation to create a sort of walk. So this is just one of the things that you can use for a DoTogether statement. You'll find the DoInOrder and DoTogether statements are something that you will use a ton of in your Alice programs. So this should give you an introduction of the DoTogether statement through a walking animation. With that said, let's go ahead and look at the Lesson 6.1 Challenge Program. So your lesson 6.1 challenge program has to do with animating this bird right here. Now I've made a very crude animation. You could definitely spend some time and do it a little bit better than what I've done here. But if you're able to recreate this animation, you will have a good handle on DoTogether statements. Now I did set up my scene a little bit by putting a billboard back here. It's a little bit grainy, but we've got a bird flying on the beach. And when we run this animation, I've got the wings turning up and down while the bird is kind of floating in place. So it's a really crude animation, and I've run it 5 times. Now if you want to play around with the loop command, you can play with the loop command. We're not going to cover it in this lesson. But similar to the way we did the walking animation, you can create a block of code to make the bird go up, and then a code to make the bird go down, and just copy and paste it however many times you want this animation to loop. Again, there's much better ways to do this, and the animation, in this case, I think, it doesn't look all that great, but conceptually, you're in a good place if you can kind of get those actions to happen at the same time. Have the bird move up while both wings are turning forward, and then turn the wings backward while the bird loses elevation. And you could probably even change the height the bird is gaining and losing. Right now I think I have it set to 0.2 meters up and then 0.2 meters down, and it might look a little bit more realistic if you played with those numbers a little bit. But your goal is to get the animation of a flying bird that you've done yourself. When you're playing with the methods, by the way, don't use these guys over here, fly, loop, feeding, fly away, jumping. I mean, they're useful, but you want to be able to program this on your own without any help. We'll get to the point where we can make these on our own, and we'll also start using them. But for right now, try and program your own bird flying animation. I'm always here to help you out, so if you have any questions about this stuff, you are welcome to leave them in the comments, and I'll help you out any way that I can. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.